dies, all of his actions will stop, except three things will continue after death. Number one, a righteous son who prays for his father or his mother. Number two, a continuous charity. Number three, a useful knowledge.
The Muslims' day was highly dependent on time, since their prayers are at specific times during the day. As a direct act of faith, Muslims invented the clock.
There were clocks in the Persian Empire, in the ancient Greek Empire, and there were sundials. But in terms of a clock, the kind that we have today, that's Islamic. The pendulum was invented by Ibn Yunus in Egypt in the 12th century, who then regulated it for its use in clocks.
Caliph Harun al-Rashid sent a clock to the Charlemagne king of the Lombards, the Roman emperor, and through their friendship an inn and a market for Christian pilgrims in Jerusalem was established. The Seljuk scientists, including Al-Qayyum, in the 11th and 12th century, were responsible for the creation of the solar calendar that was used widely until today. Muslim astronomers also devised a more popular calendar for the farmers, known in the West as the Calendar of the Cordoba, which served as the model for the modern Farmer's Almanac. In fact, the word almanac is from the Arabic word al-manakh, meaning the climate. This evidence reveals the influence of the Islamic world on the West in the keeping of time. Muslims founded the world's greatest trade route that spread from China and Central Asia to Baghdad, sometimes known to historians as the Golden Web. This was one of the most lucrative trade routes that existed during that time. It allowed gigantic trains of over 60,000 people and as many animals to travel on a regular basis from the great cities of China and Central Asia to Baghdad. From Baghdad, some of the goods would then be shipped on to other destinations, including Constantinople in Eastern Europe, Yemen, North Africa, and South Asia. The influence of Muslim trading was felt on the southern fringes of Europe along the Mediterranean Sea, in southern France, and on the coasts of Italy, Sicily, and North Africa. Never before Islam had so many people spread over a territory that made such a large range of products available to the consumer.
What Islam did was it opened up the trade routes, both the caravans and through shipping. Spices were traded, and it also opened up Europe. Europe was based on a bland diet and didn't know anything about any spices until its contact with the Muslims of Sicily, of the Boot of Italy, and of Spain. So they got a taste for ginger and cinnamon and nutmeg and even some of the teas that have come through. They got the taste for citrus, which was grown in that area. They got the taste for exotic vegetables like spinach and artichokes and strawberries and, of course, things like eggplant and so forth, melons, all came through Islamic trade with Europe. Coins are found in the tip of Scandinavia and in Iceland from the 9th century of Baghdad. That got there by shipping.
Islamic shipbuilding techniques were unparalleled anywhere in the world during that time.
The Muslims actually took the techniques that the Indians and the Chinese used and modified them. They created the first rudder. They created the lateen sail, modifying that to be a more productive sail. They created the first compass. The Chinese made the magnetic needle but didn't use it in navigation. The Muslims created it for navigation. Drugs were manufactured by the Muslims and shipped all the way to Scandinavia, all the way to South Africa, all the way to China. So they created an industry of drug manufacture.
To overcome the difficulties while traveling over the vast distances between cities and territories throughout the trade routes, not to mention the annual Muslim pilgrimage to Mecca, the natural course was for the invention of geography and map-making. Muslims excelled in geography in order to travel around natural barriers. Columbus's voyage was made up of navigators, sails, and maps that were of Islamic origin. The maps that were used were copies from Al-Idris's original maps. According to Cetalot, Al-Idrisi was a resident at the court of the Christian king Roger II of Sicily during the middle of the 12th century.
He was a highly dedicated scholar and wrote a huge encyclopedia. He was paid by King Roger the weight of his map in solid silver. Everything that Columbus did was 50% Islamic. So even until the 1500s, after the Americas were discovered, the European map industry was based on copying Ottoman maps and Islamic maps.
The lateen sail was taken by the Europeans and developed by the Spanish and Portuguese between 1440 and 1490. The word admiral came from the Arabic words Amir al-Bahar, or the Prince of the Sea. Similarly, the English word chemistry, sherbet, soda, coffee, jar, mirror, carrack, benzene, zero, monsoon, and genie all came from Arabic. The adventurous legends of the Arabian Nights, Aladdin, Sinbad the Sailor, and Ali Baba from the 7th to the 12th century are a direct reflection of the enormous culture of trade of the Golden Web and Islamic maritime. Because of the different money used in each region of the Golden Web and beyond, Muslims invented the check and the banking institutions in order to achieve a unified method of payment. The check is the most common tool of trade and commerce in the world today. The word check came from the Arabic word sak. A check would be issued in Baghdad for a particular commodity, and it would be cashed elsewhere in Indonesia, Yemen, India, or Europe. The development of partnerships and joint stock companies was another direct outcome of this financial invention of the check. Examples from the 9th and 10th centuries were the partnerships between the Muslims of Damascus, Syria, and Christian merchants of Italy. Ibn al-Haq in the Book of Roots and Kingdoms cited some private accounts in North Africa of an astonishing 400,000 dinars for precious metals exported from the Senegal.
Baghdad was known as the source of wisdom. Scholars, Muslim, Christian, Buddhist, atheist, believer, they all came and converged on Baghdad to learn the sciences.
Muslims brought to Spain the concept of municipal administration and measures of control of commerce. Today, we find many English words reflecting the economic and commerce influence of Islam on Europe. The most influential ones include traffic, from tafriq, meaning distribution, tariff, tarifa, or tax on commodities, magazine, from makhzan, to store, mankus, gauze, alcohol, algorithm, average, azimuth, caliber, and cipher, and others. The Greek method of acquiring scientific knowledge was mainly speculative. Science as such could make little headway. The Muslims, who were more realistic and practical in their approach, adopted the experimental method.
The scientific method was developed in the Islamic Empire in the 8th, 9th, and 10th centuries in detail by Islamic scientists and published in their books. They were the first to use deductive reasoning, the first to do precise scientific experiments, the originators of the original scientific textbooks, and they produced the first scientific, well-controlled trials, both in medicine, with animals and humans, and in physics and astronomy, as well as in other fields.
Some of the sciences developed by the Muslims were a direct result from the need of fulfilling their spiritual duties. Performing formal prayers, for example, Muslims face Kaaba, the house of worship built in Mecca by Prophet Abraham. This direction to Kaaba is called Qibla. Al-Biruni established longitudinal and latitudinal global lines for the Qibla in the 10th century. In order to find Qibla from any part of the globe, Muslims invented the compass and developed the sciences of geography and geometry. In 803 AD, Caliph Mamun's quest for knowledge led him to the opening of a special academy in Baghdad, the House of Wisdom. Its purpose was to translate the Greek documents into Arabic and further develop them into a science. He appointed a Christian, Hunayn ibn Ishaq, as the head of the academy.
Caliph Mamun used to pay the weight in gold of a book to be translated. If there was a good Greek book, a good Syriac book, it wasn't going to rot anymore in the monastery. The incentive was, if it's 50 pounds, you get 50 pounds of gold. Yeah, that turned some people on. And Christians and Jews and Muslims did the translations.
As well as the founding of the House of Wisdom in Baghdad, Caliph al-Ma'mun commissioned a staff of astronomers to test the findings of Ptolemy, the ancient Greek astronomer. He built an observatory in Al-Mosul, Iraq. One of the observatory staff was Al-Farghani. In 830 AD, he published texts that served as the authority for astronomy in Europe and Asia for nearly 700 years. According to Gerard de Vaucouleurs in his book Discovery of the Universe, Al-Battani was a great astronomer and mathematician. He published an original Almagest and developed the science of trigonometry and introduced the sign. He also discovered the inequality in the moon's motion, known as variation. He made new observations for the sun's position and improved the value of the tropical year, rectified Ptolemy's precession constant, and measured the obliquity of the ecliptic more accurately. Until the 12th century, Ibn Tufayl, Ibn Rushd, and Maimonides revolted against the Ptolemaic theory of homocentric model that the planets rotate around with the Earth as the center rather than the sun. Judd G.A. in the book History of Civilization regarded Al-Jabr ibn Hayyan as the father of chemistry. He discovered as many as 19 elements and is credited with correct measurements of specific weights in the periodic table for these elements. He perfected chemical processes such as distillation, crystallization, and sublimation. He was the first to distill vinegar into acetic acid. He introduced the relative solubility and insolubility of substance in solutions, and was the first to use glass tubes and bottles on a large scale. The famed physician Ar-Razi was also a chemist. He wrote the book Sir al-Asrar, The Secret of Secrets, which revealed much of the properties, colors, and types of minerals and mineralogy discovered by all previous civilizations. This book was the first example of a chemistry lab manual. The chemicals he experimented with included nitric and sulfuric acid. His laboratory included burners, water baths, a hearth, a kiln, bellows, filters, ceramic dishes, flasks, and vials. All these devices are part of the modern lab. 4 centuries later, in the 13th century, Roger Bacon translated The Secret of Secrets into Latin with the title Secretum Secretum. One of the greatest contributions to science Muslims made to the world is the creation of mathematical science. Algebra, geometry, algorithm, and arithmetic are at the heart of every scientific and social aspect of life.
Zero was used by the Hindu mathematicians for commerce, but not for algebra, not for surveying and for business, for science. And it was the Muslims of the 9th century, Abu Wafa, Al-Khwarizmi, and others, who actually turned algebra into a science, added the zero, later on added decimals. They actually turned it into a science. The word algebra from Al-Jabr, the word arithmetic originates from Al-Khwarizmi, so does the word logarithm.
There is hardly a single device, business entity, industry, or architecture built without the Arabic numerals, the decimal point, the sine and cosine, the ruler, and the compass, all of which are Islamic inventions.
True, systematic, easy-to-understand geometry is partly Greek, partly Phoenician, partly Egyptian, but as a science, it's Islamic.
Ibn al-Haytham, who was also a physicist and astronomer, used his math genius for the development of optics. In his book, Book of Optics, he demonstrated the second law of refraction for the eyes and for the rainbow. He also described the functions of the eye, such as the connectives, iris, corona, and lens. He also shows the interrelation between the various parts.
What happened was Euclid had some idea of the physics of the eye, but he was in error. Galen was in error. Al-Haytham said, no, let me look at their theories, and he changed he did experiments. The experiments proved that Galen and Euclid were in error, and he created the first correct